Hello, I'm Ann Benson, and I am pathetically right-handed. I've had a lot of success teaching tubular bead crochet to my fellow righties, but now it's time for the southpaws of the bead world to have their day. So here goes, lefties, you are no longer neglected. It's time to crochet with beads.
First, let's talk about what you'll need, because the right materials can make all the difference in your success. I recommend size 8 seed beads. 11s are small for learning, and I really think 6s, though they might at first seem like a good choice because they're large and fairly easy to see, are actually too large and don't line up well enough for a beginner. You'll need 3 contrasting colors. A light-colored pearl cotton thread, size 10 or 12, is easy to see and easy to handle. In this demo, I'm using size 10. A size 9 or 10 steel crochet hook will work. My tension tends to be fairly even and loose, so I use a 10 with its smaller shaft. If you're a tight crocheter, you might want a size 9. You'll also need a threading needle. A small tapestry needle is good, but you can also use a dental floss threader. It will carry any thread and go through just about any bead. You want to wind your thread onto a card that has 2 holes in it, so when you put your work down, you can secure the beads and your working loop. Thread your beads onto the cotton in ABC pattern. We're crocheting 6 stitches in each round, so this pattern will yield 1 round. Be very consistent in your threading, and check it as you progress, because if you threaded your beads correctly, a beautiful spiral will result. And you'll always be crocheting A into A, B into B, etc. In this way, you can assess whether you're crocheting correctly or misfiring. A threaded length of about 60 inches will yield a 7-inch bracelet, but for the sake of learning, you don't need that much. A foot of beads will do. And now that we're all threaded, we'll start with a slip knot. Arrange your thread in this pretzel shape, paying attention to which threads go over or under. Insert the hook under the thread. Pull the thread upward with the hook, and tighten the thread until it forms a movable knot on the hook. Now we'll make a chain of 6 beads. If you don't know the chain stitch, here's how it's done. With the slip knot on the hook, wrap the thread over the hook from back to front and pull the thread through the loop. To make a chain with a bead, bring a bead down the thread and nestle it under the hook very close to the loop. Then wrap and pull as you would otherwise. The bead will be caught in this stitch. When you make your initial chain for a bead crochet rope, keep your tension fairly loose, so the length of each chain is about the same as the width of the bead. You can see how the chain of beads is already positioning itself into the start of a tube by curling. Now that we have our foundation chain, every stitch we make will consist of 5 distinct steps. There is no personal interpretation room in tubular bead crochet. You must obey. The 5 steps will always be in, over, down, around, and through. We'll examine each step separately and then look at the entire stitch. I've taken the slip knot out of the animations because it proved confusing to the visual, though you'll see it in the photos. It would be about here had I included it. The first step of the stitch is to put the hook in the loop that holds the first bead you chained. Here you can see that the hook is going through thin air, not the thread, not the bead, just the loop itself. Bring the loops a little closer together. The next step is to push that bead over the hook. You want that bead on the far side of the hook. The whole point of tubular crochet is to create an interior core of fiber with an exterior of beads, and pushing the bead over the hook positions it to land on the outside of the tube. The next step in the stitch is to bring a bead down the thread. If you've threaded your beads correctly in the ABC pattern, the color of the bead you bring down the thread will be the same as the color of the bead you just pushed over the hook. Now here's the most critical point of the whole stitch, because it's here that you'll succeed or fail. The thread that carries the new bead must be positioned to the right of the bead you just pushed over the hook. If you're left-handed, it will be to the left. That thread absolutely must be closer to your dominant hand, the hand that holds the hook, than the bead that's been pushed over the hook. Let's turn this bead red to see what happens. The new bead, improperly positioned, pushes the old bead back to the front of the hook again, and the stitch fails. Now that our new bead is positioned correctly, we'll move on to the next step, wrapping the thread around the hook. Let's move our beads back so we have a little bit more thread. Wrap from back to front, over the top of the hook, so the new bead snugs up against the bead you just pushed over the hook. And the last step is to pull that wrapped thread through both of the loops on the hook. You can do this in one motion, or you can pull through one loop first. Take a deep breath, then pull through the second. When I was learning, I made a double pull, and now that I'm brilliant, I yank that thread through in one smooth move. So there it is. In, over, down, around, and through. Let's take a look at 2 complete stitches live. You'll notice that she's stitching quite slowly, so you can see what she's doing. In reality, when you've mastered this craft, you'll move much more quickly than this. Here's what your first round will look like when it's complete. Even at this early point in the rope, you can see a core of thread and the surrounding beads. It helps to flatten the work with your fingertip. You'll probably discover that you're using both hands fully. Your dominant hand is working the hook, and your non-dominant hand is controlling the thread. You need to keep tension on the working thread as you crochet. Some beaders tell me they have a difficult time figuring out which bead to go into next. The ABC pattern should be helpful, but it also might help to know that the beads of the top or working round will always be positioned like tires, upright with the hole running horizontally. The beads of the previous rounds will be positioned like donuts, flat, with their holes running vertically. The very act of pushing the bead over the hook puts it into that flat position. I talked about tension earlier and how it plays into your choice of hooks, but here's another reason to pay attention to your stitch tension. If your stitch is too tight, you'll have a miserable time getting the hook into the loop. If your tension is too loose, the beads you've already crocheted can pop into the center of the tube, and you may want to remember that the whole point is to get the beads on the outside and the thread on the inside. And sometimes we forget that golden rule of positioning the thread to the right or left, if you're a southpaw, of the bead you pushed over the hook. Here's what your work will look like if you don't obey. A very untidy spiral. You want a good, tidy spiral. You really do. Now this takes practice. You need to develop a muscle memory, like riding a bicycle or like swimming. And in the same way, once you've mastered tubular bead crochet, you will own it forever. I encourage you to keep trying, to watch this video as many times as you need. There is also a free downloadable PDF companion primer available at beadseast.com on the tutorial page for bead crochet. It might be helpful to download the page and keep it handy as a refresher when you're not able to get to this video.
If you'd like to be notified when I post new videos, please go to annbenson.com and sign up on my beaders list.
Please feel free to post comments and let me know if you've been able to succeed. Thanks for letting me into your bead life, and please join me again soon.